Good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome. I'm Joanna Williams. I'm co-director of the National Scientific Council on Adolescence, or the NSCA. I'm an associate professor in the Department of School Psychology at Rutgers University and senior director of research at Search Institute. Yesterday, the NSCA released our third council report called Cultivating Purpose in Adolescence. Our report looks into the research about why having a sense of purpose is important to healthy development in adolescence and how we can help youth cultivate purpose. You can find the report at developingadolescent.org. I want to give a quick shout out to Megan Forder, Director of Communications for the Center for the Developing Adolescent, for all of her support in getting the report to the finish line. A little housekeeping before we begin. We'll leave time for questions in the last 15 minutes of the webinar. You can add your questions through the Q&A function throughout the discussion, and we'll get to them toward the end. We are recording this panel discussion, and we'll have it available on the UCLA Center for the Developing Adolescent website after the session. So now on to today's content. During our adolescent years, from about 10 years old through our mid-20s, we're learning who we are, who we want to be, and what we value as we're increasingly able to make real contributions to the world around us. Our ability to think critically, abstractly, and long-term is expanding during this time, and we're better able to consider the consequences of our choices and engage in future planning. These are all developmental milestones that support the cultivation of purpose during adolescence. Purpose is a forward-looking life aim that guides our actions and decisions, and it can be extremely important to our continued healthy development. To talk about purpose and how we can help youth cultivate a sense of purpose, I'm joined today by our panelists, several of them co-authors of this report, and all of whom have thought deeply about purpose during our adolescent years. I'll let each of them say a little about themselves before I start the question and the panel discussion. Tony, let's start with you. Do you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Tony Burrow. I'm a faculty member at Cornell University in the Department of Psychology and director of the Bronfenbrenner Center for Translational Research here at Cornell.
Thanks, Tony. Patrick, you're up next.
Hi, I'm Pat Hill. I'm a professor here at Washington University in St. Louis and the director of the Purpose, Aging, Transitions, and Health Lab here in the Psychology Department.
Thanks, Pat. Now on to Leslie.
Hi, I'm Leslie Lev. I'm a professor at the University of Oregon, and I'm in the College of Education, Counseling, Psychology, and Human Services Department, and also the Prevention Science Institute.
Thanks, Leslie. And we've saved the best for last, Jamila.
Hi, everybody. Jamila Walida-Simon. I serve as an Associate Director for Innovation of Youth Programs with the Bronfenbrenner Center for Translational Research at Cornell University. I also work with New York State 4-H Youth Development as a Youth Development Specialist and a Civic Engagement Specialist. And I'm a PhD candidate in Global Development at Cornell.
Thanks, Jamila. So you see we have a great panel of experts, again, who've all thought deeply about purpose during adolescence. Tony, I'm going to go back to you to begin our conversation. Let's start by talking about purpose. From your perspective, as someone who studied it for a really long time, what is it and why is it important during adolescence?
Sure, I can respond to this. I want to take just a quick minute and say thank you to the Center for the Developing Adolescent and to the National Scientific Council for Adolescents for creating this space and the report that sort of is an adjoinder here to talk about this important concept. So, I think, Joanna, you in your opening remarks gave a kind of definition for purpose that I think hits the middle of the road. Certainly, there are a lot of prevailing definitions and understandings of purpose, but I think what you said is that purpose is a self-organizing and forward-looking life aim. Sort of satisfies what a lot of researchers, I think folks who think about purpose would agree, sort of satisfies how people think about purpose. But I want to just take a minute and kind of break those words down just a little bit to sort of see if we can illuminate understanding here. As a self-organizing life aim, so we think about what is self-organizing about it. And I think what folks think about purpose is that it's sort of a center of gravity for a lot of things that relate to the self. So one's sense of identity, their motivations, their values, it can hold on to those things. So purpose is sort of an anchoring concept for a lot of different aspects of the self and who one is. But it's also forward looking. So it's a prospective thing. You can orient those things toward one's future. So we might think of thinking about ourselves, our identities, not just who we are today, but who do we want to be, our motivations, what ultimately we're trying to accomplish, and our values. Why are we trying to accomplish those things? So as a self-organizing and forward-looking aim, purpose sort of is this core sort of component of who we are, but directed at ultimately who we want to be and what we want to do in the world. And so you can imagine that sort of bundle of things, why that might be a benefit to people to walk around with as a real resource, to have a sense of or an understanding of not just who you are, but who you'd like to be and what world you'd like to help contribute or help construct. And we know really from decades of research that feeling purposeful, having a sense of purpose in life corresponds to a whole host of benefits. So I think at the top of the list, you might think of longevity. So purposeful individuals tend to live longer than folks who don't feel that sense to the same degree. They also enjoy a whole host of physiological and physical health benefits. So they're less likely to get sick. They're more likely to have a broader and deeper social network. They tend to feel better, happier in their everyday sort of life experiences. And so over time, purposeful people, purpose seems to confer a host of health and well-being benefits. And so as a resource that could be cultivated, you can see why we might want to think more about a purpose earlier in the lifespan so that people can really capitalize and reap the benefits of that over time. So the research literature is pretty clear that this would be a sense worth having in life, a sense of purpose in life would really be a resource worth having. And if you have it to some extent, even cultivating more of it to reap even greater benefits over time.
Thanks, Tony. So I appreciate you sharing and elaborating on the definition, because it really sort of helps us understand that purpose can ground and anchor us, and it also can give us some direction. So it's important, to kind of cultivate in adolescence, and then it has implications for the lifespan. Pat, I want to pull you into the conversation. Like Tony, you've studied purpose for a really long time. What have you learned about how we form a sense of purpose or how we can cultivate purpose?
Yeah, it's really a great question, one that I feel like we'll be studying for still decades to come after this. But a few really important points to raise here. One of which is there is no one answer for everybody when it comes to cultivating a purpose and developing a sense of direction. That I think we have this culture around, what are 3 easy steps to this, or what are 5 ways to develop purpose, and that's just not the case, because purpose, as Tony rightly noted, is such an individual thing and such a personal construct that of course there's no one way that everybody is going to come upon and be able to cultivate their direction for life. So with that in mind, you have to take a rather individualized strategy. And some of the ways that we've recommended to try to help people develop this direction and sense of direction focuses on, reflecting upon what you did that day. So, if there were certain times during your day or during your week, during your month, in which you can point to and say, like, I really felt like I was directed in that moment. I really felt like this was an activity that gave me a sense of purpose, a sense of direction in my life. You can then start building up from there. Like, for instance, let's say it is joining this webinar is giving all of us panelists this huge sense of purpose and direction right now. If you think about it that way, what are some activities that you might do that are similar? Like, is it teaching a lecture? Is it going out into the community? Is it communicating science to others? And when you start to find that perfect mix of things that makes you feel directed and purposeful and gives you this guidance, then you can kind of go up from there of maybe my direction really is focused on promoting science. Maybe my direction is really focused on community engagement or speaking, giving lectures, in education in that regard. So that's kind of how we tend to help people, because if you start off with just, I need to find a purpose in life, it's way too daunting, way too big of a thing for any of us to try to manage. So especially when we ask these questions to youth and we're working with youth to help them cultivate this purpose, it's really important not to give them this weighty, over-the-top thing to start with, but have these conversations around, what did you feel in this day? What kinds of things gave you this direction during the day? And another point that I like to talk about is, again, there may not be any one pathway that works for everyone, but in our research, we have found that a number of people tend to talk about at least 3 different things that might have given them that spark, that idea of purposefulness. One of which is very common, thinking of the educational setting I'm in now at the university, is this very proactive exploration of people go out, try new things, they're open to new experiences, and they kind of, again, reflect upon what clicked for them and what didn't click for them. And I should mention, like, by clicking, it's not just like I enjoyed that, but that's something that made me feel like I have an idea of what I want to do next, or I have this guidance to go ahead, like Tony mentioned. Another element of this is thinking about past life experiences. So we have a number of people who mention they found or cultivated a purpose by recognizing what mattered to them in their past and why it mattered to them. So individuals whose family members had something happen to them, and then they recognized the importance of raising awareness for, a health concern, or raising awareness for social justice initiatives around the world, as a reflection upon the major activities that took place in their community, either to them or to others. And the final part of this, particularly valuable for talking to this current audience, is how important social modeling and social learning can be for the purpose development. So when we think about social learning in this context, it may be the case that we provide mentorship for youth to do a similar direction or have similar life goals to what we espouse, but it also could be just going up in front of youth and demonstrating what a purposeful life and purposeful activity looks like. So for instance, in our classrooms, there are not going to be many people who are terribly excited to do the exact same thing that I'm doing with my life, but being able to show what purposeful activity and purposeful engagement looks like, and how it gets us going and gets us to all the benefits that Tony mentioned earlier, is a key component of it, that just having role models of purpose can be as influential for individuals starting to cultivate this and starting to mimic some of the activities that those purposeful role models are doing. So again, none of those things are going to work for everybody, but maybe one or more of those things may be helpful for you to help youth find that direction and cultivate that purpose in life.
Thank you so much, Pat. Leslie, before I come to you, I just want to check in with Tony and see if there's anything else you want to add about how we form a sense of purpose, knowing that you and Pat have worked closely together over the years. Do you feel like, Pat pretty much has it covered?
Oh, it's of course true that Pat always has it covered. I would actually just affirm where he began, that it can be convenient to try to distill pathways to purpose down to the 3 easy steps or to this pathway, but it seems to be characteristically true of purpose that people cultivate it, discover it, find their way to it through a lot of different pathways. Though we do tend to see some reliability around the sort of proactive or reactive or social learning pathways. So the people who, when we've looked for it, we tend to see people sort of either gradually cultivate this over time, or respond to something pretty salient that's happened in their life, or they're sort of mimicking what purposeful behaviors or actions look like in life, those broad categories of how people sort of arrive there tend to show up time and time again, though that leaves a lot of room for people to sort of discover it for themselves in a lot of more nuanced ways. So I don't want people to think if they're not on those pathways that it's too late for them or they can't get there. But we do tend to, when we look for it, tend to find those sort of core pathways that you described time and time again across data sets.
Thanks, Tony. Leslie, I want to turn to you now. A couple of the things that Pat and Tony said really sort of resonated as, like you, somebody who cares deeply about adolescence and adolescent development. So I heard exploration, I heard social and learning together. And so that makes me think, of course, about, developmental needs and opportunities during adolescence. So from your perspective, how should we think about purpose supporting positive development for young people? And why is it good for us to have a sense of purpose?
Thank you, Joanna. And I think I can iterate a lot with some of the things that Tony and Pat had mentioned about the benefits of purpose, but really hone it into what's happening during adolescence, this sort of, as Joanna, you set the framework, this age, 10 to even, early 20s. Developmental period. And what we know from the developmental science there is that is a time where youth are identity seeking, they're exploring, they're doing healthy exploration that sometimes involves risk taking in a healthy way, but nonetheless it's exploring to help them craft their identity and figure out who they are, what they affiliate with, where their connections are, what their connections are with peers, what their connections are with their families. And in addition to that kind of social component, there really is a cognitive component as well. Youth as adolescents are becoming much more skilled at this abstract thinking and being able to imagine scenarios that they haven't experienced, but they might experience at some point in the future. And so kind of with that backdrop of what's happening developmentally during adolescence and how those milestones really help adolescents grow and develop into and launch into young adulthood and adulthood, I think it really is synergistic with the concepts of developing purpose. So, you think, for example, having these opportunities to explore and figure out where do I find passion and meaning in life? That is connected to purpose. It's also connected to identity seeking and formation. It's also involved with some of the kind of healthy risk taking. Maybe to put it more concretely, you could think of an example where a youth maybe they're in a drama class or drama club as part of school, and they realize there's parts of that they like, and maybe the public facing part, but they don't like the whole concept of being on stage and acting. But it kind of has spurred something because of that experience that, well, maybe what if I tried debate club? That has some of those skills, and that can feel risky. It could be something they haven't tried yet, but it's a way for them to kind of take what they've learned from one context, maybe extrapolate it into another context, or take what they've, as you all have Patrick has said, observed or seen somebody else doing and try it out for themselves and see if it's a fit or not, and become something that helps them grow or cultivate their sense of purpose. I also just want to comment a little bit in terms of how does that then connect with positive development, with healthy well-being? And I think there is a clear link from the research around the connection between cultivating sense of purpose, having a stronger sense of purpose, and mental health and mental well-being. And as one concrete example there from the research, if we think back to kind of the middle of the pandemic, which we know from the research did have an effect on mental health across the lifespan, regardless of a person's age. But we also know from the research that if you look specifically at adolescents, that those youth who had a more cultivated or stronger sense of purpose were protected from some of the harmful effects of the pandemic on mental health. So having that sense of purpose, that something that you're passionate about, that motivates you and drives you, was able to help them overcome some of the hardships associated with the pandemic. And it may be maybe they came into the pandemic with that sense of purpose and that helped them thrive and was protective, or in some cases it can be that a hardship such as the pandemic can motivate or inspire or create a space or a time or a place for a person to have that introspection, that exploration, that time to explore and develop a sense of purpose. And we did certainly see an increase in, activism, whether that was for, public health or social activism as a result of the pandemic, that I think is connected to some of this identity exploration. So I'll pause there and see if panelists have reactions to my comments.
Anybody want to add? I think, Leslie, you made a lot of important connections between what we know are sort of developmental needs and opportunities during the period and how purpose kind of fits in. So let's build on there and turn it over to Jamila. So you've got deep experience working with and for young people. And I think that perspective is important because a lot of us who care for and support youth have these questions. Like, we might know that it's valuable to have a sense of purpose. We might also know that we can't give youth a sense of purpose. We can't say, this is what your purpose should be or is going to be. So how can those of us who care for and support youth, like family members, community members, teachers, those in youth development programs, how can we help support youth in cultivating a sense of purpose themselves?
Yeah, what a great question. And what a great time to be exploring these. I first want to say that when we look at the nexus of community and schools, certainly school partnerships, programs, and families, right? That's where we're going to have the greatest level of success. And so when I think of my role as a youth development specialist, I think about the entire family, right? And the environment that those families swim in. And so by and large, that has to extend beyond just that one-on-one work with young people. So in the study, it refers to purpose as being this renewable resource, which is really incredible, right? Way to think about it. And so in my role as a Spark champion, right, it's to notice, right? When do those young people light up in a space? How can I then continue to encourage them to move along in a particular direction or to explore through our program or through other programs that particular spark? It's also noticing when a young person's light is dimming and also checking with family members, and if they're in the school environment to see where those things are also happening. Pat referred to, right, the extreme dialogue, right? Creating opportunities for the dialogue to happen. So you might notice it as a Spark champion or as an adult leader in a particular space or as a parent, and then you're going to want to communicate with that young person to find out if that's truly a space that they see themselves, if they've had other experiences, right? So that exploration and discovery can take place, or they can shift into something else that they see for themselves. I think telling the truth around things. So we have current events that are swirling all around us, and being in spaces where we can open those opportunities for dialogue is really important for our young people. And that might also be in a space where young people find themselves like, oh, in the telling of truth about these particular set of events, right? I'm beginning to find my purpose and my spark and a way for me to be able to move forward. I think it was Leslie that talked about identity development, right? Where are the programs and spaces that we have that create opportunities for young people to learn about themselves? And that's a space that, we may find where they're learning about the history of our family and our community. And again, that truth-telling piece, emerges again, where we're getting to learn these deeper pieces that will connect to our sense of purpose. Healthy risk-taking, right? Where are the spaces within community that I can test drive some of these experiences in a healthy way that are really going to help me to grow and expand and to learn. And so those discovery opportunities tend to be really embedded in programs and communities and in schools. And I think using that as a pipeline and a pathway for folks to be able to engage with young people, and then diverse opportunities. I know that at some point we're going to talk about barriers, but creating diverse opportunities. You might be in a community where STEM really is the focus, or the focus is really on arts. And so bringing in, STEM opportunities and things that maybe young people might not have seen in that community because of issues around access. Um, I think also that requires, right, really thinking about who are the caring adults that are in these spaces, right? Do they see themselves as both learners and educators along the way? And that can help as well. And then the last space that I think of often is in the online space. And Leslie, you spoke to this. During the pandemic, we saw that we had a lot of things that went viral, and a lot of cyber activism, right? And so, where are the spaces that young people find themselves? And if they're in those online environments, if it's in social media, how do we feed them in those spaces as well? And so, those are some of the things that I have swirling in my mind and that we see in practice. And I think, again, just reiterating that there is no one size fits all space for helping to put young people in those spaces, and that direction comes from within. And so, as educators and as adults, whether we're parents or community leaders or engaged in school partnerships, right, it's that noticing piece that I think is really important to help cultivate some of these experiences and to help young people develop their own sense of purpose.
Thank you so much. I love the idea about like noticing and nourishing sparks. And I feel like that is something that, all people who work with and for youth, including peers, are positioned to do. So that's important. You kind of hinted at this, and I want to follow up with you in thinking about issues of equity and inequity. So in your experience, like on the one hand, we say that purpose is really important and important for all youth, not just some. And it's a renewable resource that we can cultivate for all youth and not just some. But are we doing that now? Do you feel like all youth have equitable opportunities for cultivating purpose?
Yeah, I wish that was the case. I wish we were here having and celebrating that was an opportunity. But I think that there is space for us to be able to think and to expand ourselves to think about creating those opportunities for access and those access points. I think some of the barriers really include thinking about what does true participation look like. So if you have a program that has fees associated with it, right, creating that opportunity for a sliding scale so that you're able to take on maybe young people whose families can't afford to be involved in those spaces. And I think that those are really small things that we could do. Of course, we always know that, the typical barriers are money, transportation. And so I want to take this in a little bit of a different direction. When we think about ourselves, and certainly in the field of youth development, we think about the ways in which we support and work one-to-one with young people. But I think we should be thinking much larger. So how are we working to connect with schools? How are those school partnerships going so that you're feeding that sense of purpose in schools, right? Schools are primed as really great places, not only because young people spend an incredible amount of time there, but because there are Spark champions in schools as well. And so we're literally passing the baton from the family into the school, into those after school partnerships and into community. And so where is that pipeline in terms of helping to plant those seeds for that sense of purpose to be developed within those young people? So thinking about the ways in which we support parents, right? So if we're in a space where we're running programs and we're not communicating with parents, right, that's a really missed opportunity. There's a real deep space where we can cultivate and support parents to be thinking about how they help to develop their own child's sense of purpose. And more than likely, that parent is going to have a lot of clues around what things are going to help to spark their interest and what things they've seen over their lifespan, right? And so those are great places. It could be that we're sending text messages to remind folks, right? Hey, do you remember this is a way to help to cultivate a sense of purpose within this young person, and then tagging that into that school environment. And then by and large, our programs certainly are spaces to be able to do that. And then in community. And I think that as we're developing out those really tangible spaces, that creates not only just a buffer for them to be like, oh, I keep bumping into this thing. What's this sense of purpose? And then for us as educators to just be clear, right, that our resumes are a roadmap for where we've been, but they don't necessarily tell the story about what our sense of purpose is. And so every single time we're running a program, to be able to start by sharing what our story is. And I think that those stories are incredibly powerful. And they allow for young people to sort of relax a little bit in their bodies as best as they can as adolescents, and be thinking about themselves and what they want for themselves.
Thank you so much, Jamila. I think you've offered a fairly comprehensive and concrete way of thinking about how we build like an ecology so that it doesn't have to happen in just one space, but that young people have lots of, connected opportunities where that would support the cultivation of purpose. Before I move to the next question, let me just ask if any of the other panels want to say anything related to equity and opportunity for cultivating purpose.
I would. I mentioned this, and it sounds like Jamila just described the meso system. It sounds like she hangs out in the Bronfenbrenner Center. Like this is such, I think, a keen insight that we tend to describe purpose as an individual asset and in like an internal resource. And though it might be that, it is also profoundly social. To Jamila's opening point, a spark champion, it's a commentary that we can notice in other people, their aspirations, and we can participate in those. We can become co-conspirators in what other people are trying to do. And we could also extinguish it if we're not careful, right? Or intentionally or unintentionally. And so it's a reminder, this conversation can be a call in to thinking about not just the development of our own purpose, but how the role we play in helping other people cultivate theirs and pursue theirs, and reminding us that that's happening in spaces. That's the physical spaces, the social spaces we create, the spiritual spaces that we create, the connections between those spaces. And to your point, Joanna, it's an ecological game. And it's wonderful to be reminded that purpose can resemble a personalized resource, but it's also visible. Not just in what people are trying to do, but to Pat's point, when he opened, it can be a spark that other people can see. You can ask people, when during the past week have you felt most purposeful? And let's really attend to that and create more spaces for that to be more likely to happen as we go forward. And so it's a reminder that this thing has a social side that is visible as well. And so we then think about the structures that we create that can create affordances or opportunities for some, particularly youth, or create barriers that really marginalize or exclude or ostracize people because the thing they're aspiring to do, we don't understand, we don't like, we don't fully appreciate. And we need to be mindful about how we can both be an impediment and an affordance for young people as they're pursuing their purpose. So I just appreciate the reminder that these things are in an ecological system.
Yeah. Tony, before you go back, Pat, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna just echoing what's being said here. I know to point to something Tony always emphasizes in discussions, like the wording when we talk about purpose really matters because of this point. Like the discussion around, okay, you need to find your purpose is a really problematic lens for this exact point, because it is not all on you. And Tony writes about this quite eloquently in his work of it's not finding purpose as much as what can we all be doing to cultivate and grow purpose among individuals, and taking as much as we can off that individual lens. And we've talked about this in panel discussions before around every time that we speak with youth. One of the first questions that we ask children is like, what do you want to become, or what do you want to do? And it's so focused on you rather than what can we be doing to help you and support you and scaffold you throughout that process. And I really love this point, and it just leads to something that seems like a very minor thing we can be doing differently, but it's a really important thing we can be doing differently, of just starting with wording our questions and wording our reactions to emphasize the social component that's being brought up here.
I can just chime in with one additional comment. Clearly, this is an important theme for all of us here, but I just want to echo one comment, Jamila, of yours, Jamila, about the school system and kind of that as a context, because I think just playing on some of these themes, that is a setting, a context, an opportunity where all children, all adolescents have access to free public education. So it provides one context amongst all the others we've talked about here that I think there are real opportunities to be able to educate our teachers, our principals, our superintendents, our school boards about the importance of purpose, and have that be more infused into our school settings to just give a platform for some of these opportunities for exploration in ways that could increase our equity for opportunity.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you. Tony, what I was to ask you to build on is something that I heard you say towards the end. I don't know if I can, I'll just paraphrase a little bit. So you pointed to the fact that for some youth, we don't necessarily understand the thing that they are really interested in. And we sometimes will then be inclined to shut it down because of this lack of understanding. So I would love for you to say a little bit more about that. And just also, if you could respond to the question about, is there any such thing as like a negative purpose, especially when we think about young people?
Sure. To the last point, I both love and don't love the question about negative purposes, but let me at least try to explain why that's complicated for me. Yeah. So just to build this up, I guess just to riff really on what Jamila laid out here is that I think we oftentimes, as was mentioned, engage young people around purpose solely through their ability to articulate it. So what is your purpose is a question we ask on sometimes admission statements or application forms, or in person we'll just ask, and then in either the pause, the silence, or our judgment of what people say in response to that can kind of make or break our sense of whether they even have it in the first place. They may feel it profoundly, but because they can't articulate it in a way that I fully understand, or the substance of what they're saying I just find disagreeable, can then kind of marginalize people. It starts to other them, essentially. Well, that's not the thing that I would do in the world. So therefore, either you're not purposeful, or you have a very different kind of purpose, and there's no funding available for that here. There's no resources. Like no one here can speak to this, so we don't really advance on that particular aim. That can happen to people, and I see it maybe even most harmful when it happens to young people who are forging a sense of who they are in the world and their ability to contribute to it. If in those early stages, we as spark champions or spark detectors don't acknowledge what we see in sparks, or don't have resources available. I don't understand what you're trying to do in the world because that's not something I would do in the world. That can extinguish, that can sort of put out the flame of what somebody may have otherwise gone and do in the world. And I share that because to jump to the broader question about negative purposes, it gets really complicated for me because at the time a spark might show up, it may be in sharp contrast to the world as it is. I can think of a lot of prominent, salient examples where somebody in the world went on to do something profoundly positive, generative, constructive, but to the microsystem that they were living in, it was antagonistic. It was something that they did not invite, they did not welcome, but it ended up proving positive over time. And so whether a purpose can be negative or problematic, I think it just raises all kinds of questions around, well, negative for whom? What is negative? What is bad? Who gets to judge that? To the person for whom the consequences matter first because they own the purpose, it may feel profoundly positive, the right thing to do. They're trying to fix something in their world that is wrong or problematic, but the world might say, well, we don't want you to do that. So I just think there's a clash a little bit of who owns the definition of good and who gets to shape that narrative as we go forward. I will concede it is just the case that there are things people can aspire to do that are harmful. A person could aspire to do something that's harmful to themselves or other people. And if that's what we mean by bad or negative, I could show up for that conversation. I think in today's climate, I could imagine without much strain, somebody's purpose is sort of shaped by doing harm in the world. And I think that's easy to agree that would be bad or problematic, but it gets more complicated when you ask them why. Why is that the thing they're trying to do? Because some of those indicators or correlates of the benefits of purpose that we've talked about and we've opened might be present when a person's trying to do something in the world that I discount or call bad. They may reap greater life satisfaction. They may feel more self-esteem. They may feel more positive when they're working on those things. And I think we should take that seriously, that a purpose can be difficult to extinguish, because for the person for whom that's their thing they're aspiring to do, it's coming with all of these returns that feel good to them while they're enacting it. But we might look to the social audience, the world in which they're navigating, as evidence the thing you're doing while you're doing it, it's hurting a lot of people. And here's why. And so I'll hold it up that it's complicated to sit back and sort of armchair. There's a negative purpose in the world. And I sort of a priori say that's on the good list, that's on the bad list. That gets murky to me, because while they're pursuing it, they may reap all the benefits we would want for young people. But we think downstream. And conversely, there may be purposes that cost the person a lot. I can think of purposeful enactments that cost the pursuer their life, that over time became resources for our society and for people. It was good that they worked on those things, but it came at a pretty heinous cost to them or the people around them. So it gets tricky. From which perch are we judging goodness? It becomes like a sort of a moral question. So, but rather than that, I think what we want to focus on is a sense of purpose. Is that when people feel purposeful, we know it corresponds with these wonderful benefits for them. And that's probably worth thinking about sometimes separately than the content of what they're actually pursuing. Both are important, but we might want to distinguish whether a person feels purposeful and the things that are likely to come along with that from, well, what is the content, or can you articulate to me in a way that I really understand and appreciate? What is your aspirational substance that you're pursuing?
Yeah, so just to echo two of these points, starting with the most recent, another thing that Tony's alluding to here is the importance of not shutting someone down if they can't articulate what that content. So another reason for focusing on sense of purpose, as we note in the report, is there's a lot of us, myself included, who might feel very purposeful and still be trying to figure out how exactly to say, like, my purpose is X, and that doesn't stop all of the benefits that Tony has talked about and we talk about in the report. But getting to the second part of this, like, there has been discussions around like who should be the adjudicator of what is a purpose or what is a good purpose. And some of those conversations have involved, like, well, if you can't describe it, then you don't have purpose. And that immediately shuts the door. But also, like, taking this back in even less extreme than like positive, negative, there's certainly a strong push for discussing purpose as this like moral, pro-social thing at times, and eschewing any kind of purpose that doesn't align with that, and to give examples of how this can manifest with youth. We've done, like, Tony and I have done work years ago in which we were asking adolescents, what was it that gave you this sense of purpose or direction in your life? And they gave these remarkably robust and thoughtful answers. Like, anyone who doesn't believe that adolescents can wrestle with these constructs just need to read a few of these things, because they were beautifully written. But you would get answers in which you might see things that looked very selfish and individualistic at first, or how people might think of it as selfish, like people might code it as selfish, individualistic. Like, I need to get success at work, I need to get promotion at work, I need to get a higher pay, like I'm focused on getting more funding. And then they would bring up, because they needed to support a growing family, to support my community, like they saw all of these themes as very intertwined. And this came as kind of a conflict to a lot of the discussion around, like, well, if you focus on what they say first, like, oh, it's to make a lot of money. It's like, well, that's not the kind of purpose we want people to have. But just like Jamila and Tony and others have raised, like it's not extinguishing it at the first mention. Like, okay, why? Why are you talking about promotion at work? Why are you talking about these, like getting a successful career? Well, it's because of all these other added benefits, these things I can do for my community, these things I can do for my family as a result of that. And they thought of these things as all intertwined. So the last point related to this like positive negative piece is, it's really tough to even try to figure out what part of these very complex, comprehensive purpose statements, like that you would deem as positive, negative, and as Tony and others have mentioned, like thinking about this from a very ecological model, it's very possible you would have something that is seemingly positive at one level of the family or community, but seemingly viewed negatively by a higher level of the government or political structure. And those are the kinds of purposes we may need more than ever of trying to raise up those individuals who are, like Tony mentioned, willing to go against systemic structures that might be leading to the inequities and lack of availability, lack of access that Jamila mentioned earlier.
Thank you so much, Pat. That actually, I think, ties in with the first question that I'm going to pull from the Q&A. And Jamila, I may direct this question towards you. I'm going to paraphrase it slightly, but the question is about how we involve youth in our work, of course, related to purpose. And there's a question about what youth themselves think about the research done in this space. But I wonder for you, in all of the, direct service spaces you've been in, how you see purpose showing up for youth and how you involve youth in, the co-cultivation of purpose.
Absolutely. Yeah. So being a part of 4-H Youth Development, the cornerstone of our work is really around youth voice, right? So we create opportunities to make transparent the work that we do so that youth aren't engaged in programming and then just like, oh, I didn't realize that was a youth development experience. Like we make that transparent to them about why the programs are structured in the way that we do. And after school programming, which was the space that I came from, and currently in my work, I create an opportunity for young people to do the planning with us, to have that full rights over the decision making. And after school would be participatory budgeting. So that meant that whatever snacks I was going to purchase, young people were going to decide what those things were. Now, within reason. But it created opportunities for them in the current space to be making decisions about what we were doing, how we were moving forward. And that included our program design. So at the beginning of programs, my director would say, well, what are you doing this year? And I would say, I have no idea. I have to ask members of the community, and I'd knock on doors and ask folks, what do you want to see young people engaged in? And that's what we would do, right? That takes a particular type of educator, that takes a particular type of space, and you have to be willing to take direction from others. But once you're seated in that space, and once those young people are seated in that space, really amazing things happen because they take ownership for how that space runs. And they move into a space where they're currently voting with their feet around what experiences they would like to have. And in those spaces, we've seen young people really thrive and flourish, and move on to do things like invite their peers into programs, so that we're not having to be at the helm of enrolling folks. And so there are a number of really great benefits. But I think it starts again with the folks that are in that leadership seat, determining for themselves what they're comfortable with. And if you are comfortable with turning over the reins and having that shared sense of power, it creates really wonderful opportunities for young people to arrive at spaces pretty quickly.
Thank you so much. Tony, I'm going to turn to you to reflect on the second part of this question. So I'll say to the audience that we have a Youth Scientific Council on Adolescence. And I know when they were first formed, the first iteration of the Youth Council, they were really interested in talking to Tony about purpose. So I'm curious, this question is, what do youth themselves think of the research done in this space, if you have any thoughts on that?
Great question. And this would be a great question for young people, certainly people far younger than me, to answer what they think about it. I can share a little bit about my reflections on what they shared with me about the research. So like a lot of areas of youth research or adolescent research, I think adolescents, young people in particular, adolescents in particular, feel a little picked apart. That the definitions that researchers often use for purpose were constructed oftentimes without youth voice present about what these things might be. I think there's a sense that purpose, as researchers tend to conceive of it and measure it, can come across almost as the word of it, it's like a privilege. Like, that, wouldn't that be nice to have? I have more immediate concerns that I got to think about, but purpose might be nice to have. It can be sort of ethereal in a sense. But I share that one because that clashes a bit with what I think sometimes the science of purpose, and certainly the theoretical foundations of why researchers nowadays are thinking about purpose, is it's not necessarily just for the affluent or those with an abundance of resources. There's a lot of reasons to think about purpose coming out of experiences of strain or marginalization, or when people don't have as much as they otherwise might need. And so it creates a conversation point for young people to think this is a resource that oftentimes, largely because of the way we use it, adults might use it in the world as purpose, is this sort of fluffy sort of concept. And young people wondering, well, what is their relationship to this concept? But through conversation, realizing, wait a second, these aspirations, this articulation of maybe even more proximal goals and lining those goals up with what they reveal about who you are and your values. There's a whole conversation that can be had there, and like we've had with the youth council, that it is a much more accessible conversation. And to Pat's point, when you create spaces for young people to not just talk about their purpose, but what the concept is. We've done studies where we ask people, what does purpose even mean to you? They have a lot to say about this concept. So I think it is one of those concepts that, to the point made earlier, is socializing this concept with parents, with educators, with people, with adults who are in proximity to young people, can create a whole host of important, meaningful, and needed conversations between adults and young people as they go as well. And I just want to say, I mean, this is a great question. So how do we involve young people? You know, I've an emerging project for us and my colleagues here is this idea around contribution, building from a whole literature around purpose and contribution share something. There's evidence that purposeful individuals tend to be more generative. They think about how they can contribute to other people, and opportunities to contribute and or limited opportunities to contribute can give rise to a greater sense of purpose. Andrew Fellini, a member of the National Scientific Council, has done studies on this, showing that when young people in particular feel that their contributions are minimized, ignored, or not valued, it can give rise to a greater sense of purpose. Like, there's evidence, there's things in the world that I can go do and push back against. And so we run projects where we ask young people not what is their purpose, but what is a contribution you'd like to make? And our fundamental question is there, what do they see in that opportunity? Is like, when you're in the driver's seat, you decide what would you contribute in the world, and what is it you would do with that? And does pursuing that actually give rise to what we might measure as a sense of purpose in life? So trying to learn about how young people understand purpose, not by the explicit engagement with the concept, but by the opportunity to go pursue something that they find meaningful, and looking at sort of the contents of that. We sort of found a way to realizing that is another way to engage young people around their sense of purpose, by not always talking about purpose, but by creating opportunities for them to pursue and act and do things in the world, and then asking about why they did those things.
Thank you so much, Tony. You mentioned the importance of kind of socializing people who work with and for young people into understanding, you know, some of these things. So Leslie, I wanted to turn to you. I also want to say, Abby, thank you for those thought-provoking questions. I want to pull from Ruth's question about teacher preparation, and just, Leslie, if you have thoughts about, as we're preparing educators, how do we sort of socialize them? You know, what are some ideas you have, or, you know, do you know specific examples of how we prepare educators to help support the cultivation of purpose?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Ruth. I think, first of all, I do think your idea that you posted in the chat there of framing it with teachers or teachers in training around their own sense of purpose, and having them kind of have that personal reflection can help them translate that into the classroom. I do think, and I'd be interested to hear if Pat or Tony know of published research in this area, because I couldn't think of anything, but I would kind of come at this from two angles. One is sort of that teacher preparation side. So working with those institutions that are doing the teacher preparation, that are certifying teachers so that the students have the curriculum, the opportunities, the experiences while they're in training to understand and embrace the importance of providing spaces for purpose exploration in the classroom. And then the other side of it is more after the fact, that we, of course, have a society full of classrooms and teachers and principals. And for those of you who are working in schools and have those partnerships or are working with folks who can establish those collaborations with schools, is to come at it at the school-based side once teachers and principals are already in the system. That said, it takes time to nurture and establish those partnerships and trust to be able to have those conversations. But I think there are kind of those two, coming at it from those two sides, one on the kind of prevention side, teacher training, but also then working with our existing schools and principals in training contexts.
And Joanna, can I just hop in here really quickly? I'll just say that in the school environment, I tend to also think about who are some of the other players that hold influence. And so we know who those teachers are. We know who those lunch people are, the bus drivers, right? Where are the spaces where that information would be really influential because they have a window of time and a window into those adolescents and young people that would be really influential. And so that could be peers. Again, folks that work in the school cafeteria that are fueling those young people, right? It could be social workers. And so not adding on to what teachers are doing, but also helping to complement those spaces. So providing that information to teachers and to administrators, but also thinking about who are the other folks that have influence, security guards, right? And those are spaces that tend to be really welcoming spaces for us to impart that information to.
At risk of derailing, let me also add to this. In thinking about expanding the sort of the social ecology who can be involved around this, I think it presents an opportunity to also think about the necessary and helpful resources that help adults who are in proximity to youth to think about their own purpose. I think so much I'll speak for myself, that when we think so much about youth purpose, we forget that sometimes the adults who are closest to them have never been invited into some of these conversations. They've never been introduced to the formal literature on purpose. Nobody's ever asked them, what is their purpose and what are the processes by which? So I think it's an opportunity here as we think about inviting adults who have relationships with young people to understand their role in helping cultivate purpose, to also think about their purpose as well. And I think because for some people, it can be a heavy concept, is I don't know what my purpose is, how could I be helpful to others? And so we're thinking a little bit more about workshops and trainings, not just to think and remind them about their role for youth development, but their own, and how adults with more resource and thinking about purpose in their own lives might become the kind of social context in which young people who see that might start thinking about their own purpose. And so think about the whole system and our role in sort of creating healthier systems for young people includes the adults who are closest to them.
I love that, Tony. I think time-wise, that's going to have to be where we end, but I think it's a really great place to close. And thinking again, how do we build an ecology where all young people have access to opportunities that help support and cultivate purpose? You know, how do we socialize those who work with and for young people to ask them questions like, what do you want to contribute? What are your sparks? I'm now affiliated with Search Institute, so I'll put in a plug for resources we have on like conversation starters for igniting sparks that adults can have with young people, and other resources like that exist too. So imagine, I think, the actions those on the webinar can take in your day-to-day lives and day-to-day experiences with young people. There's a lot that came out of today's conversation that I hope you will take with you. In the chat, I have put, again, a link to the report and encourage everybody to share this with your networks. I want to take a moment to thank the Center for the Developing Adolescent and Megan Forder in particular for organizing today's webinar, and thank all of our panelists for your thoughtful contributions. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.